Guy Dauncey, and I'm just going to kick this thing off briefly before handing it over to Iona. I want to, I'm the co-chair of West Coast Climate Action Network, and I want to acknowledge that personally, I live on the traditional lands of the Stoneymook and Shtaminas First Peoples. The process of doing reconciliation and learning our history here is wonderfully complicated. It requires so much learning and humility. This map shows the language groups throughout British Columbia. And to know that these people, the Indigenous people, have been occupying these lands for anywhere between 5,000 and 15,000 years. And it just leaves me with the knowledge that we have constant learning to do. And with that, I'm going to introduce Iona, who's our host for today. Iona Santos-Fresnoza is the founder of Kapé Philippine Coffee, a social enterprise for award-winning single-origin coffee from Indigenous and women Filipino farmers. Believing in the power of meaningful, purpose-led work, she also works as a program manager at the Immigrant Employment Council of BC, working with community partners to support immigrants in achieving successful careers in Canada. Over to you, Iona.
Thank you so much, Guy. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you all today and take part in this important conversation. So I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Hamkinakem and Squamish speaking peoples. And I'm grateful to be on this territory. As what you guys said, like this path towards truth and reconciliation is very deep and complicated, and it's humbling to be here. I also acknowledge that this June, among the many things Canada is celebrating, we are honoring Indigenous History Month. So as an immigrant, I'm on a journey of unlearning, learning, relearning, and really recognize that I do have a role to play in our shared path towards truth and reconciliation. And if you are new to this conversation, I invite you to check out native-land.ca to learn more, or connect with your local Indigenous community. That is the best way forward as we do this unlearning together. So today we present the fourth in the West Coast Climate Action Network's 4-part webinar series on transportation in a time of climate crisis. We're focused today on car sharing, electric vehicles, and urban freight. So the West Coast Climate Action Network was founded last year, and it has 223 organizational members spread all across BC. Its website is westcoastclimateaction.ca. And if you are not following them yet, go check their website out. Its 6 teams are busy with various initiatives and publishes a major newsletter every Friday. So make sure that you all sign up. In each of the webinars that we're hosting in this series, we aim to lay out the best transportation policies and solutions for a socially just, inclusive, and flourishing British Columbia in a time of climate crisis using 100% clean renewable energy. The previous 3 webinars covered the themes on great public transit, great walking, cycling, and rolling, and complete communities. And the videos of the webinars are available on the We Can website. So make sure that you check those out if you weren't able to attend those. So before we dive into our discussion, we'd like to have 2 quick polls for you. The first one, I'd like to know where you reside or are joining us from. So please do select your region from this list. It'd be great to see where our attendees are joining from. We have more than 50 individuals joining this. This is great. Select your region. Make sure that you are representing where you are. We'd love to know. We'd love to know where you are. Okay, thank you so much to the 84% of you who participated, and let me share the results now. So a lot of us are coming from the Lower Mainland and the Vancouver Island and coast. And please do feel free to type in the chat where you are joining us from. We'd love to know who's in the room, and hopefully we can get connected to afterwards. All right, we have another poll for you, which is on car sharing. Are you a member of a car sharing group or a cooperative? Yes, no, not yet. Thinking about it, maybe we should. Okay, still waiting for you to respond to the car sharing poll.
Did the poll come across? Yes, it's working now. There we go.
Oh, perfect. Okay. We are, I say we, my husband and I are members of Modo, proud members and ambassadors of Modo. And it has been so helpful to us not having a car, because we feel like we don't need to. Like we have access to so many cars, more than 500 across the Lower Mainland. Amazing. So let's look at the responses. Thank you to the 88% who participated in the polls. Majority are not yet members of a car sharing group or cooperative. 22% are members of car sharing or co-op, and the 17 who said not yet. It would be great that maybe after this conversation and discussion, we'd be able to win you over and help you in making that decision and sign up.
So Iona, before you go on, I see we got people joining us from Nova Scotia, from Wisconsin, from Toronto.
Amazing.
We're more than just BC here. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for typing that into the chat. So thank you for making time. It's evening your time, but we appreciate you joining us. Okay, yeah, and with the soaring gas prices, rethinking the way we move really is very, very important now more than ever. Okay, so we will have 3 distinguished speakers this afternoon to share their insights and perspectives on our topic, transportation in a time of climate crisis, and invite you all to use the Q&A option and not the chat option for your questions. So we all are able to see that, and all of the speakers here in this room, and we will do our best to accommodate your questions after all the speakers have given their piece and shared with us today. So I commit to keeping us all on time, and we'll really do our best to have a great conversation here this afternoon. All right, so let us now dive in and hear our first speaker. We'll start with Patrick Nangle. He's the CEO of Modo Cooperative, a mentor to young entrepreneurs, myself included, and an urban beekeeper. He is a strong believer in community and sustainability, and an advocate for the role of member-owned cooperatives and social purpose enterprises in strengthening community resilience. He serves on the boards of Van City Community Investment Bank, and the BC Co-op Association. He's really proud of the way Modo lives its deeply embedded purpose and the value the cooperative creates for its members and other stakeholders. And I can really speak to that. Modo has been such an emblem of a purpose-driven cooperative. So without further ado, join me in giving a warm welcome to Patrick Nangle.
Thank you so much, Iona. Thank you for that introduction and for laying down the challenge. 60% of people aren't even thinking today about getting involved in car sharing. I will first acknowledge that I joined from the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to share a few slides. It seems that quite a few of us on the call aren't very familiar either with car sharing or with Modo, so I'm going to explain a little bit about that. I'm going to speak about some of the initiatives that we work on that we think are helping to address some of the transportation issues that we have, many from various angles, including environmental harm caused through the use of cars. And then finally speak a little bit about initiatives we could look forward to from government, municipal, provincial, and touch a little bit on federal government as well. So I'm going to do a screen share. One moment. Okay, there we go. Okay, so first, what about Modo? So we were founded in 1997, so it's been 25 years. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary right now. Just announced that through social media and so on a few days ago. We were the first car sharing co-op in Canada. We're in fact the second organization in North America to do car sharing. Somebody in Montreal got over the line just ahead of us. And still today, we're the largest car sharing cooperative. We have a bit over 25,000 members. Today, 725 vehicles will be about probably 800 vehicles by the end of the year. We're seeing annual growth in the neighborhood of 10 to 15%. By that, I mean both members and vehicles. They go hand in hand. We're a consumer co-op owned by members, meaning the people that use the service, that use the cars, are also the owners of the activity of the co-op. Our members are typically middle to lower income individuals and families, not only. We have others, but this is kind of the sweet spot of the market that we serve. We're not a car rental business. We're not advocating the use of cars. We advocate walk, bike, and use transit as first choices. And when you do need a vehicle, because sometimes you do, use a shared one, and we make those available. And we've had a few transitions over the years into what we know today as Modo, the Victoria Car Share Co-op, which Guy with us today was one of the founders way back when. I think nearly probably within a few days or months of Modo getting started. Merged into or amalgamated into Modo in 2015. Same thing with the Nanaimo Car Share Co-op in 2017 and the Okanagan Car Share Co-op in 2018. We are very, very focused on our purpose. This is something that resonates very strongly with me, something I insisted on when I joined the co-op in 2016 as leader, to work with our board to make sure we had a very common understanding, why do we exist? What are we trying to achieve? Make sure we all shared that view. That comes before strategy. Strategy is about achieving that. Purpose is very durable over time. Strategies change, typically on a 2, 3, 4 year kind of cycle with a lot of tactical change in between. And then finally, last comes structure. Once you've decided your strategy, what's the structure that's going to work best to deliver on the strategy. So a lot of work on this, a lot of focus. It is the North Star on all sort of strategic decisions that we're taking. So what does that look like? It's pretty simple. We think about it. We talk about it a lot. I kind of think about it as a bit of a triangle. You got the very sort of macro big picture at the top, and then it gets more granular as we go down. So we start with transforming communities. A lot of people say that. Then connecting people with places. So we're coming into the zone of transportation. And then very specifically in a way that's affordable, convenient, inclusive, and sustainable. And by sustainable, we mean environmental harm, making sure that we're mitigating that and reducing that to the greatest degree possible. And we do that today by providing and operating a platform that enables the sharing of vehicles. The platform is a digital platform with people behind it and contact center and on the street taking care of cars. We do all the own software development in-house. So the platform we've created, we keep it up to date. We're rewriting it right now. And we actually license that to quite a number of other smaller car share operators across Canada and a few in the United States. All co-ops and not-for-profits only. Part of the value proposition is you have quite a range of vehicles. A member has quite a range of vehicles available. When you buy your own car, you have to take a decision which car across a bunch of use cases that you might have. Sometimes you're driving alone. Sometimes you have more people in the car. You're driving farther. You may be moving stuff. We offer a range of vehicles and people have the opportunity to match the vehicle to the nature of the use, which allows also for reduction in sort of environmental harm or environmental impact. So little two-seaters, all kind of regular sedans, SUVs, passenger vans, cargo vans, pickup trucks. We're in about 25 municipalities across BC today. So over on the island, all around Victoria, the Capital Regional District, in Nanaimo, all over the lower mainland, and then over as far as Kelowna. The little dots, the red dots you can see correspond to where cars live. We call those home locations. And if you're familiar with Vancouver, you see a very heavy concentration where a lot of people are living, the downtown. And then if you're really clever looking at this, you'll identify the big transit line, the SkyTrain lines. So there's a lot of density built along those transit routes, the big ones. And so we have cars that kind of track that out into other parts of the lower mainland. And you see quite a few cars around the universities, SFU and UBC. And then you can see in the box in the lower left, you see Victoria. We have about 125 cars in Victoria today, very, very strongly growing area for us. Okay, I'm going to speak next about three initiatives that we're working on that I think might be of particular interest to this group. They're kind of variations on the core theme. The first one is a project that we call Vanpool. So Vanpool is a hybrid. I think we're the only ones in the world doing it. It's a hybrid between car sharing and car pooling. So it means that part of the time the car becomes a carpool vehicle. So we're doing this pilot with TransLink and with UBC. So there's people working at UBC that need to get to work. Parking is difficult. There's traffic and congestion on the way there. Using regular transit, depending where you live, can be pretty time consuming with multiple changes. So we've got 10 vehicles in the pilot, vans and some regular sedans, and they're dedicated to these groups. So for a period of time, think Monday to Friday, commute to work in the morning, kind of a 2-ish hour window, commute home at the end of the day, another 2-hour window. The car is a carpool vehicle during those periods. The rest of the time, including at the university, it reverts to a regular Modo shared car available for any Modo member to use. So this is really thinking about how do we optimize in the best way these shared vehicles to suit as many, to serve as many people as possible, and to reduce, the need for, more vehicles on the street. So really interesting. It's gone really well. We've been in this pilot for a little while. COVID, of course, caused us a bit of a pause, but we're working now with TransLink to take it to a next level. More employers, more locations, more vehicles, more people involved that can take what was a car sharing solution and use that also to resolve multi-occupancy commuting. Okay, that's the first kind of interesting initiative. The second one is what we call the Shared Mobility Compass Card. So again, this is a project with TransLink, also with Mobi. So for those not familiar, and let me explain, TransLink is for those that are from further away, TransLink is our local transit system operator. They do a bit more than that, but they operate the train, the buses, the ferries, and so on. So transit system operator, giant compared to the others in this Evo, which is another car share operator, a different form of car share, one way versus our round trip, kind of complementary. A lot of people join both. And Mobi, which is a shared bike service provider here in the region. So the four of us have been working together on this Shared Mobility Compass Card. The easiest way to think about it, the card you see in the picture was purpose-made for this initiative. A lot of people in Vancouver today have a compass card in their pocket. They use that to access transit. Tap in when you get on the bus or go on the ferry or use the SkyTrain, the metro. And so the simplest way to think about this is use that same card to open a shared car. So open and get access to a Modo car, to an Evo car, or to release a Mobi bike. And then with a payments infrastructure behind that, which is also unified. So the idea here is to make the use of shared mobility super convenient, super well-known, very widespread. Join one, join all is kind of the idea. We've already run a business-to-business pilot, very successful. It actually won an environmental award, a national level award, and we're working now on a much larger B2C, business to consumer pilot, and then hopefully, if that goes well, then a much bigger rollout. This is a concept that's under the umbrella of something that's known worldwide as mobility as a service, MaaS. We see MaaS being practiced in different places in the world in different ways. We will do it in a pretty unique, made for Vancouver by Vancouverites kind of approach, where the biggest difference, I believe, is that the shared mobility service providers are really sitting around the table. Think about that as a round table, equal partners evolving with this system. This, when and if we make it work, and I say more when than if, will be something really transformational for the region and getting people out of their own vehicles into shared mobility. And I'll come back to that in a moment. And then the third item that I want to mention in terms of initiatives that are like on the top of our plate right now is a transition to a zero emission fleet. So 725-ish cars in the fleet right now, it's changing every day, but let's say 30-ish zero emission vehicles today, including 2 hydrogen fuel cell cars. This is an example in the picture. The rest are battery electric vehicles. We have some plug-in hybrid as well. We'll probably have 50-ish zero emission vehicles by the end of the year. Our intention is to have a zero emission fleet, complete zero emission fleet by 2030. There's some things to do between now and then. There are some challenges. Our members really like the zero emission cars, the electric vehicles. They are very well used. This is one of those examples where it takes a village to make it work, and a lot of people in the village are in government at the three levels. Frankly speaking, I'll come back to that when I talk about what's needed. They can do more. They can and should do more to make this work. We feel more disadvantaged than helped at this stage. So it's a bit difficult to make the business case today, much as we would like to go faster. Okay, changing direction a little bit. So we're a co-op. Co-op means, as I mentioned at the outset, the members of the co-op own the activity. People buy shares. Our members contribute $500 in capital. We pool that capital together. That's the capital that we use to fund the enterprise, mostly invested in cars. And then on top of that, people pay when they use a car, they make a contribution towards the cost of using the car. And that's based on fixed and variable costs. And we attach that to time and distance, which kind of replicates the way we incur cost. So a very strong value proposition. In this case, everything that gets earned stays in the local community. We're not paying dividends to people in Silicon Valley or New York or London or anywhere else. It all stays here. The principal idea is thousands of people that co-own and share hundreds of cars and pay their fair share of the use of those cars and all the kind of the infrastructure behind that, the platform and the service and so on, and nothing more than that. Really nothing more than that. It's a bit challenging to make money in this business, frankly. At the start of the pandemic, we were 4 players in this space. There were 4 car share operators. 2 of them left right at the outset of the pandemic for, I think, cost reasons. It wasn't working for them, so they up and left. So the 2 that left were not locals. The 2 that remained are 2 organizations that have roots here in the community. And this is something that I think really speaks loudly to co-ops in particular. We're here to stay. We've been here for 25 years. The 2 that left, one was a European company, one was an American company, both giants, and just up and left. I'm still trying to get over the way they treated their people that were using them with relatively short notice, just up and left. So that's a really important difference in regards to co-ops. Okay, the last thing I wanted to mention, I didn't make a slide for this, is so what's needed to make car sharing to make it more widespread and more impactful, right? And this is one of our, we have every few years we update our strategic themes that we work on, and one of those is simply scaling up, right? Go back to our purpose statement, to transform communities. How do we go beyond, doing something we think helpful in terms of affordability and environmental impact for 25,000 people, and how do we bring that to sort of community level, so much bigger scale? And so we look at that, we work on it, and there's some assistance we could use. The shared mobility compass card is going to be a really big step in that direction. But what do we need? Great public transit is the starting point. So there's a lot of investment going into public transit now. Happily, governments at all levels seem to be aligned today for that. You need to have a way for car sharing to work in your life. You need to have a way to get where you go most days, work or school, kind of for most people, or whatever you do, using transit or walking or riding your bike. Then you can car share and kind of fill in the gaps. You're not going to car share if you're driving to work every day out in, wherever you're going. That doesn't really work. The second point is we need to close the convenience gap. And again, the shared mobility compass card is a step in this direction. When you choose to car share, there's a bit of a convenience trade-off you make. You have to book the car ahead of time. You have to think about it. You have to maybe walk a block or two to get to the car. Maybe you have to carry some stuff. If you have children or pet, it gets even a little bit more complicated. So there's a convenience trade-off compared to having a car in front of your house or in your garage. And so our work is to close that gap, to become more and more convenient and make the difference. Third point is awareness, simply awareness, making sure more people understand the possibilities, the options that they have. And then the last point I wanted to make is around what I alluded to earlier, government supports on all levels. So today, to my great frustration and against a lot of efforts, we don't have access or hardly have access to government EV purchase incentives. So the federal government, if you buy an EV as an individual, federal government will give you $5,000 rebate. Here in BC, the province will give you $3,000, $8,000 in total. Goes a long way towards the total cost of ownership of having that and equating it or making it better than a regular gasoline-powered car. We're only allowed 10 of those in a year. It's obscene compared to 700 cars, right? Been back and forth with Transport Canada about this one, and they just haven't budged. First point. So that's at federal level. At provincial level, we have a cap, a lifetime cap of 50. Right, we'll have exhausted that by the end of this year. And what about the other 650, 750 cars? So that doesn't really work either. So there's a lot of room to do things there and to change the understanding of, what does it mean to choose a different form of car ownership, a shared form, a cooperative or collaborative form of car ownership versus your own car ownership. I'll give you another anecdote. A lot of people that reside in BC will be familiar that everybody is about to get or just got a check for $110 to help you with the price of fuel. That went to everybody that owned a car. We don't get that. So our thousands of members who choose to collectively own cars have to pay the extra value for as fuel prices have risen and costs have inflated, where their neighbors that own a car don't. Really inequitable in our opinion. Again, tried on this one. And finally, Iona, how am I doing time-wise? Am I still okay?
Yes, last 30 seconds, Patrick.
Okay, so good, just in time. So lastly, regarding municipalities, really important. Municipalities, we work very closely with all the municipalities. They've been great partners. Big role they have to play is in regards to parking. Where can we put the shared cars? And then finally, really challenging is the access to charging infrastructure. There's a lot of room here to find much better solutions than available today. If you spend $40,000 for an electric vehicle, and you have to spend another, depending where you put it, $5,000 up to $20,000 for the charging station that's paired with it, the economics simply don't work. Okay, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patrick. That was a really great discussion. And I agree with you said that it really does take a village. It really does take all of us to make this alternative mode of transportation work. And there's been a lot of great discussion in the chat, and thank you to those who have posted your questions on the Q&A. There's a lot of interest about the EV plans, so thank you for referencing that, and we'll be able to delve deeper at the Q&A later on. So for our second speaker, we'll move to Guy Dauncey. He is the co-founder and co-chair of the West Coast Climate Action Network. In 1996, he co-founded the Victoria Carshare Cooperative, now a part of Modo. And in 2002, he founded the BC Sustainable Energy Association. He is the author or co-author of 10 books, including The Climate Challenge, 101 Solutions to Global Warming, and the ecotopian novel, Journey to the Future, A Better World is Possible. He lives in Yellow Point, which is north of Ladysmith, and he shares a Kia Soul EV with his wife, Caroline Harriott. So I now give the virtual stage back to Guy Dauncey.
Thank you, Iona. C'est Guy en Quebec. It's Guy out here. C'est tout le même. So let me dive into this play from current side. I think that's all working for you. So the movement, I see electric vehicles as one part of an essential climate solution among many others, and it's deeply mixed with the movements to stop pipelines and to sort of end the fossil fuel age in general. If we go back 100 years, between 1900 and 1913, the major cities of the developed world of Britain and North America did this incredible shift within 13 years from going all horses to all cars. And if you look at the graph, you'll see a rapid drop off of the horses and a rapid increase of cars. And so we're doing the same thing is happening now. In the in the 2000s, it was all internal combustion engines. By the 2040s, it'll be all electric vehicles. And this change is going to be far more rapid than most people understand. To put it in context, we do believe that sustainable transportation hierarchy is important, with the first emphasis for getting around is walking or rolling, then riding a bike, public transport, freight and taxi and car sharing, and then a private vehicle. So this is the end of the line when, in terms of transportation, but many people do need private vehicles. Eric Doherty, who's been active with us, published this piece basically saying that as part of the way to reach BC set a goal in its climate roadmap to get 25% less traffic by 2030. And the less highways we build, the more traffic evaporation we get, because the more highways they build, the more you get traffic. So there's a wonderful law that when you make it harder for cars to get around, people are more likely to walk, bicycle, take the bus. So we start the electric vehicle thing with e-bikes, over $1,000 upwards. If you live on the North Shore, you can get around everywhere. An e-bike just eliminates the hills. If you've not tried one, please go to a bicycle shop and take one out for road trial and go to a hill, and you'll just sail up it and you think, there's no muscle ache, it's easy. Then there's little electric scooters. You can get them on Amazon for $600 plus. The minutest micro form of transportation. We have put a petition together to change the way active transportation is funded in British Columbia. Right now, it gets $20 million a year out of an overall budget of well over $2.2 billion, which is less than 1%. We see the need for a fivefold increase to at least $100 billion funding annually to build the bike lanes and the walking routes that are needed to get people out of their cars. When it comes to urban delivery, we were going to have a delivery by Joel Gibbs from Shift, but he's unable to do it. So a quick reference to the Shift Delivery Co-op. And interesting here is that they're partnering with the Ministry of Transportation to create an e-bike micro hub. So packages will be brought to the hub by truck and transferred to e-bikes, which have large rear cargo boxes for final delivery, which will address congestion caused by the double parking in those endlessly circulating white vans looking for a place to park in rounded circles. The Montreal micro hub handles 5,000 packages daily in a process that's more profitable and efficient than delivery trucks. And the mayor of Vancouver says that cargo bikes have the potential to replace vans or trucks for many types of urban delivery. Moving slowly up the scale of electric vehicles, Taiwan has 23 million people and 14 million scooters. That's how people get around in Taiwan. But a company called Gogoro has developed this new system for very quick instant charging, literally 20, 30 seconds of recharging your vehicle, just like that. And they're really scooping up the market. So there's a massive transformation. They're now spreading to India, to other cities of the world, so that we probably will see the end of noisy fossil fuel scooters entirely across the planet within 10 years because of this modification. And all the electronics are just on your cell phone. Just plug it in and off you go. Then Vemo in Vancouver is producing a sort of a hybrid electric pedal assist microcar for urban uses only, top speed 32 kilometers, range up to 70. If you put a deposit down right now, you'll be able to buy one for 12,000 when they come out next year. And John Stonier, who'll be speaking later, was involved in an earlier stage of Vemo. When it comes to electric buses, we just have to bow at China's incredible leadership. They have really shown us what's possible here. In Shenzhen has 16,000 electric buses and 22,000 electric taxis. So when I look at the Canadian municipalities nervously saying, well, let's try 3 and see if they work. It's almost laughable because they cost more to buy, they cost so much less to operate. The finances come even over the 12-year life of the bus. In America, one of the transit agencies in California is 18 years ahead of schedule on going, fully electric with its bus system. We can all do this really rapidly. BC Transit in Victoria is quite ahead of the curve, but TransLink is very slow to embrace electric buses. We're also getting movement on electric school buses. That's beginning now with some grants from the federal, I believe, government and the provincial government to help electrification of all school buses. So we also have a petition, and Sebastian will probably share these in our chat, as well as the petition on active transportation. We believe that we need a world-class BC-wide public bus service throughout British Columbia, connecting remote communities, removing the risk of hitchhiking, the danger of missing and murdered Aboriginal women, increasing security and safety and connectivity. So we don't need to drive a car when we're going to Kelowna or up to Nelson or up to Kitimat. When we look at electric vehicles, like all technology, they follow the S-curve. With a slow growth as technology develops, and so there's vast few years, people are being skeptical, say, oh, it'll never happen. And then as prices fall, you get this exponential growth and then market saturation. So in 2022, all of these new vehicles are coming on the market this year. There's an explosion of new vehicles. And I know it's amusing because you can't get an electric vehicle. Every one of these has got a waiting list of a year or so. So get yourselves on the waiting list, and that's to do with supply chain disruptions coming out of COVID and other things like that. But there's a whole slew of new vehicles arriving on the market pretty soon. And starting at the smallest end, this little neighborhood electric vehicle is selling in Paris for $6,000. You can get around. It's an urban vehicle, 45 kilometers an hour. You don't need to go any faster than that in the city, but look at that price, $6,000. This vehicle is $12,000 electric dollars or so. Then you can have delivery vehicles. This is for urban delivery. It's like a electric version of shift delivery. And then this is a solar charge vehicle. So you can get 40 miles a day on solar charging, not to 60 in 3.5 seconds. So who knows what's coming on our streets quite soon. Volvo is now owned by a Chinese company called Geely, and they are putting this Volvo car on the market in China for $12,000 to $15,000 so this is the way prices are heading for North America. When they've got such a massive Chinese market, they can build out expansively in China before they get to North America. But this is the way things are going. Other new vehicles that are coming electric market, the Rivian. I've got a thing blocking my panel, so I can't read the bottom of my slide. So there we are. The Polestar Cameo. Hang on, let me get back on track there. The Ford F-150. Almost identical to the current gasoline one, but you can actually power all your man tools and woman tools can be powered up from the car. Volkswagen got a whole slew of new electric vehicles coming. The Canoe, the first equivalent to the VW bus, is coming on the market next year, so you can go holidaying. Hummer, like it or hate it, it's coming electric, right? But then the other end of the scale, students at University of New South Wales in their SunSwift team, they've smashed the world electric record, which is 5.5 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. This vehicle uses 1/4 kilowatt hour to travel 100 kilometers. Just amazing. So show what technologically is possible. When we look at range, all of the new vehicles are now coming in at close to 400 kilometers range. The Neo, which is one of the Chinese companies, up to 620 kilometers range. And another Neo is getting up to 1,000 kilometers in range. So range anxiety is just going to disappear off the radar as a thing of the past. And the Neo is also looking at a new way of swapping out batteries. Instead of having to have the same battery for 10 years and then replacing it entirely, they're experimenting this. You just drive, you reverse the car in, automated stuff, takes one battery out, puts a new one in, and off you go. And they're saying that could actually reduce the cost of a car by $7,000. British Columbia is leading the way when it comes to charging on progressive bylaws supporting electric vehicle charging. So all of these 15 cities with Burnaby at the top require pre-wiring for level 2 charging in new multi-residential buildings. So the charging piece is coming up pretty quickly behind the explosion of demand for electric vehicles. So back to that S-curve, that's the theoretical curve. Now we look at the practical curve and we see that with the electric uptake in British Columbia, we're ahead of that S-curve. So that's pretty good. And then globally, it's looking like this. With the biggest demand in the red color is China, is the global demand, then yellow is China, then the 3 purple are Germany, UK and Britain, Canada somewhere down there. And you'll see that on the right-hand column, 71% of the new vehicles are full electrics. Some of them are the blue plug-in hybrids. But this is growth is happening, so up to 84, big numbers there. And Bloomberg estimate that we're right now at the peak of the global passenger fleet that's not electric. It'll start falling off steadily. I think it'll go faster than that for reasons I'm going to show you in a minute. This is what it looks like. So only 1% of electric vehicles are vans and trucks. 4% are passenger cars with 10 million globally. 39% of vehicles are actually buses with a fleet of 600,000 globally. And 40% are these 2 and 3 wheelers, the small ones. So that's the way it's rolling. When we look at the gas price now coming up to $5 a gallon in America, $2.20 a litre in Canada, and you compare that with the efficient electric vehicles, which are actually doing 15 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers, that costs, depending on which BC Hydro rate you're paying, between $150 and $200 to drive 10,000 kilometers. That's a figure that most car drivers just can't believe. You can go a whole 10,000 kilometers for $150 if you have the most efficient electric vehicle, and the least efficient electric vehicles, the Mercedes, even them are only paying $300 to $420 to drive 10,000 kilometers. So the finances of this are just fantastic. When you compare the cost of a Volkswagen electric with a Volkswagen Tiguan, of the full 5-year total cost of ownership, Volkswagen's coming in just under 40,000. All the others are ranging from over 40,000 up to 53,000 when you combine the purchase price and the gasoline, not spending on gasoline costs. So you're looking at financial benefits here. You compare the 2 Hyundais, the internal combustion engine over 8 years is costing 67,000, assuming 20,000 kilometers a year. The electric vehicle is costing just under 50,000. That's a saving of almost $18,000. And that's at a price of $2 a litre. Now it's $2.20. So that's 10% in addition to that. So that saving is now probably up to $18,000, $19,000 saving. Same comparison between the Hyundai Sonata and the Tesla Model 3. Over a 10-year period, the Hyundai Sonata is costing $80,000 and the Tesla Model 3 is costing $75,000. So even if you go fancy with a Tesla, you're saving money. In the bigger picture here, it is generic things. If you look at a vehicle you'd be used for 6 years, if it's 72,000, you've got an average of $6,000 savings, between electric and non-electric. So now the end of this transition is coming a lot more rapidly than we think. These are car companies that have announced when they will no longer produce internal combustion engine vehicles. Acura next year, then Jaguar, Mercedes, Volvo. Then we get up to Volkswagen, which say 70% by 2030. And then Cadillac and General Motors, which are the bottom of the list. Well, not Cadillac, but General Motors at the bottom of the list. And some of the motor companies that are not listed have not made those commitments yet. Politically, in terms of electric vehicle mandates, Norway is saying 100% of new vehicles must be electric by 2025. Then a bunch of countries are saying by 2030. And then when it comes to 2035, we've got the whole of European Union. Literally today, the European Parliament voted that all vehicles must be electric by 2035. California, Canada, and there's other countries. So that's the mandate for the transition. So this is literally at 6 p.m. British summer time today. That was like 10 o'clock this morning. Members of the European Parliament voted to end the sale of petrol and diesel cars by 2035. I believe that within 3 or 4 years, they'll be bringing that forward to 2030 and following Norway's example. So Acura has said no more cars no more non-electric cars as of next year, Fiat by 2030, and people saying that California's mandate to sell only zero emissions by 2035 maybe is not as crazy as the critics think. And Canada's got the same mandate, 100% passenger car and passenger truck sales, 100% by 2035. Norway, in 2020, had 87% of all vehicles registered were electric, including 20% that were on plug-in hybrid electric. So only 2.7% of vehicles in Norway were burning petrol, 4.8% diesel. This is what happens when you really put the incentives properly on the table and get the transition. So I believe this is a dramatic transition for two particular reasons. The first is gas station economics. What I've taken below, that same S-curve you saw, I've just literally reversed it, because it starts off with drivers not being worried, and then the gas station business case is going to collapse. Every gas station owner has a profit level margin where if they don't service enough cars, they're losing money and they're going to go out of business, and there won't be the gas stations to service the remaining gasoline cars. Here's Norway, gas pumps are disappearing as electric cars are taken over. And here's one gas station in Norway that's removed all gas pumps, so they're only doing electric charging. So if you're driving a gasoline car, it's going to be harder to find a place to recharge. The other reason why I think it's dramatic is that the resale value of a used conventional car is going to collapse with just the same reverse S-curve. So you might think now you can get 100% of your asking price when you want to buy an electric car and you're chipping in the value of your current car. By 2025, you might get 70%, by 2020, 30, 25%, by 2035, scrap value only. And I would probably believe that actually it'll be scrap value only by 2028 as the market collapses and people realize, holy moly, like move quickly because you're going to miss the boat. So true or false? Some people say that electric vehicles produce more emissions through their manufacturing and operation than conventional vehicles. In reality, electric vehicles produce between 83% and 25% less emissions, depending on where and how the electricity is generated. So in BC, it's 83% less emissions because of the cars being manufactured. The manufacturing requires the use of fossil fuels. And so you down to Florida, 51%, Saskatchewan, 34%, Alberta, 25%. And a recent environmental life cycle assessment, which factors in the emissions with manufacturing, was commissioned by Plug-in BC and the Fraser Basin Council. It concluded that electric vehicle charged in BC pays off its environmental burden within 30,000 kilometers driven. Any distance beyond that becomes carbon negative. That's, in other words, within a year and a half. And these cars have got, 15-year life cycle. So that's the same quote at the top, and that just shows the reduction. So in the right-hand column, for the operation of the car, you've got 99% less greenhouse gas emissions in British Columbia. You've still got the emissions associated with the manufacturing of the car. And the Union of Concerned Scientists come up with the same kind of data, that as the electric vehicles, improve the battery and in renewables that charge the grid, your global warming emissions are really shrinking down. Then we come to cobalt mining, and the people saying, well, electric cars are terrible because of the cobalt mining. So number one, companies are developing ways to recycle the batteries and the mineral contents. Number two, cobalt's only used in one class of electric vehicle batteries. Others use little or none. The current range of Tesla uses no cobalt, the standard range. The US Department of Energy is aiming to eliminate the use of cobalt in electric vehicle batteries by 2030. Battery leaders Samsung and Panasonic are both phasing out cobalt. And finally, electric vehicle motors are being developed that require no rare earth minerals, using iron nitride supermagnets and control software and power electronics made of silicon, which is Earth's most abundant solid element. So Tesla's already using cobalt-free batteries for half of its new cars produced. So this is the cobalt intensity of a battery, as it's reduced by 2035. But then when we look at the global use, lithium, manganese, cobalt, and graphite, we'll still see that there's, this is actually where the minerals come from. So half of the cobalt is coming from Congo, but it's not the only source. But the recycling of the rare earth metals is a big thing that's increasing. So we've got this, increasing potential to use recycled rare earths. And electric battery recycling itself is heating up. Volkswagen, Lifecycle, and US Department of Energy are all sort of jumping in to develop the ways for, what will soon become mandatory electric vehicle battery recycling.
Just to wind up. 1 minute.
1 minute. We have electric tractors, electric fire trucks in Los Angeles. We have electric small runaround trucks. We have electric big trucks, and more electric big trucks, catenary electric trucks with overhead powering, and we have hydrogen powered trucks. And before I pass over to John Stonier, I'm going to drop a little hint that if you drive an electric car and you get one of those ICBC rebates, maybe you think about donating it to WeCan. We are 95% dependent on voluntary donations. And with that, I'm going to hand over to John, who knows far more about electric vehicles than I do, to take it away and correct everything I said that's wrong and give us more wisdom. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you so much, Guy. Lots of exciting things happening in the EV world and lots of discussion as well in the chat. So if you want to read through those and also chime in, that'd be great. So our last but certainly not the least speaker for our session today is John Stonier. For the past 20 years, John has been a serial entrepreneur focused on renewable energy, e-mobility, and zero-emission vehicles. As a community volunteer, he has taken on director roles for a number of sustainability organizations, including the BC Sustainable Energy Association and Solar BC. Since 2006, he has been a member of the Vancouver Electric Vehicle Association, where he has been active as an EV policy advocate, spokesperson, and as president from 2020 to 2022. Having advocated for progressive EV charging infrastructure policies at the civic and provincial level in BC for many years, John has now formed Electric Advantage systems to assist condos and other building owners to plan and install EV charging infrastructure and to navigate the government incentives that are available to assist these projects. So please welcome John Stonier.
Thanks so much for the introduction, Iona. Well, I'm not going to have the polished presentation that both Patrick and Guy had. I'm going to just provide some commentary on what my experiences have been with electric vehicles and what I've been studying for the last few years and where we're going right now. So just general comments. What I'd like to say is I'd like to just deal with light duty electric vehicles that are in play right now. We can talk about micromobility a bit. I want to also get into heavy duty vehicles, and in heavy duty vehicles, we're going to talk about hydrogen, and we're going to talk about battery electric and other ways of decarbonizing that sector of the fleet. And so I think I'll just leave it at those three areas. So quite right. A few years ago, I started a company called Metro, which has the VEMO trike. And the basic concept of that whole initiative was that we realized you don't need a 3,500-pound car to take a person from one side of town to the other. And that was the whole concept. And at the time, 2014, when we were doing this, Vancouver was just emerging as a e-mobility car share leader. And the Modo had been there forever, as Patrick announced. And so we started this with that sort of concept, is that really you don't need a lot of material around you to get around as a vehicle to transport. So that was the whole basis of that. And sharing was another thing. And this comes across a couple of things that is important to think into when you're talking about decarbonizing vehicles, is basically asset utilization. Patrick touched on this. He's got his cars going on the van pools in the rush hour times, and they're used for other purposes during the day. Asset utilization, and then also having the right vehicle for the purpose you're using it at. Another one of Patrick's points that I thought was really sort of in line with what I wanted to say. So what we have right now in electric vehicles for consumer cars is the automakers are building these cars, and they're trying to sell them based on, you can go 0 to 60 in this speed, and you can go this amount of range. And it's always trying to make sure that people can do all the things they want to do. And the auto industry has been sort of notorious for doing this for some time. And if you look at the SUV and the pickup whole thing, they have pushed these very large cars. And really what we're doing is we're having a Hummer to go down to the grocery store to pick up a couple liters of milk. And we're there's a problem. We've mentioned the supply chain issue with electric cars. Right now, there is anywhere from a year to 18 months delay. And so what I see in the industry is that the industry itself is over engineering vehicles. The vehicles have too much range. They are carrying around hundreds of pounds of batteries that they're only using a fraction of for most time. For the odd trip during the summertime, they may be using those batteries to go, say, 200 or 300 kilometers at a time. But it's very rare that you need to go 500 kilometers in one sitting. Human beings really don't like doing that without having some kind of a break. So generally, I think the light duty vehicle space is overbuilt. And this is also going to exacerbate supply chain issues as more and more production starts to happen. We've already got a strain. There's been lots of metals that are shooting up in value because of the demand from the automakers to supply all these vehicles. And bigger batteries is going to play a big part of that. The carbon footprint of electric vehicles is all up front. That's where the carbon footprint is. Once you've got it, the carbon footprint is relatively light, and depending on the source of energy you're drawing from. So I see that we're going to have a problem in producing the amount of cars for the demand. In the past 6 months, year, with the price of fuel going up, obviously everybody wants an electric car now, and it's just a matter of how soon can I buy one. The good thing about electric cars is they age very well. And we're going to have people wanting to buy new electric cars that already have them, and they will sell their old ones. The great thing about used electric cars is there's still a very valuable resource. The only thing you have to be concerned about really is the battery. But it's really true that the million-mile battery is here. It's very easy to get 1 million miles out of a battery, and but 1 million miles with just an average driving range is almost 80 years of driving. So you're going to be passing down these cars, hopefully in your will, to your grandchildren and so forth. But the great thing in the used car market, electric cars are cheaper to buy. And they're very dependable in that you don't have to worry about them breaking down. You can get an assessment on the battery pack, so you know what the battery pack status is. And on battery packs, I've been driving electric now for over 10 years. I have my original 2012 Nissan Leaf. Now, I don't put a lot of mileage on it, but it is a 10-year-old vehicle now. It does have reduced capacity. Batteries lose capacity over time. They typically go down to about 75 to 70% capacity, and a 70% capacity battery is what's called a spent battery. But that battery is completely still usable in other uses. And basically, there is no compelling reason to do something about it unless it's not meeting your needs. So that used car, my 2012 Leaf, I would say before last September, was probably worth maybe $8,000 on the used car market, has a range of 80 kilometers, and its original range was maybe 120. What can you do with that car? Well, I use it as my city car, and I maybe charge it once a week. I mean, driving in the city is not a lot of miles. So that car is completely good car. There's nothing wrong with it other than it can only go 80 kilometers at a time. I actually did take it out to Chilliwack last summer, and I had to charge in between, obviously, to get there, and in between to get back. But it was a 13-minute stop halfway along, and I still was able to use that car to transport things and transport people. So it's valuable. And now, what I said the price 6 months ago, well, as of September last year, I actually bought a second electric car. We sold our last gas car, and prices have shot up since then because the supply chain things started to happen. And now that my used Nissan Leaf, I could probably sell it for maybe double the price. And people who have used Model 3s and things like that can now sell them basically for more than the new price, even the increased new price, because it's either waiting for 12 months or you pay a premium price for a used EV now. So I see the used car market as an excellent opportunity for people to get reduced price cars when the supply chain settles down. We still have a problem with the supply chain, and it's not clear when that's going to end. Like I say, I think we're going to have continuing supply chain issues, and it is already affecting how electrification of cars are happening. So let's take an example of, say, Tesla. The Cybertruck was announced quite a few years ago now, and the Tesla Semi was announced quite a few years ago, and the Semi was supposed to go into production, say, in 2018, and then it was 2019, and then 2020, and now it's sort of like 2024. They're going to make a few of them this year for demonstrators. But there's a fundamental problem with producing large format battery packs for a Tesla Semi truck. And the problem with that is Elon can sell he'll put a 500 kilowatt hour pack into a Tesla Semi, and it'll have range, they claim, of 500 kilometers. I think that's a bit stretching it. It'll have some reduced capacity because the weight of those batteries will offset some of the weight of the payload to get that range. But here's the fundamental problem, and it's very simple. 500 kilowatt hours of batteries is about the same as probably about 8 or 9 Model Ys or Model 3s. He can sell that semi-trailer truck for, say, well, they listed $150,000, maybe $180,000. That's what they're planning on selling it for. But if they sold 8 or 9 Model 3s or Model Ys, they're probably going to sell about $600,000 worth of cars. So if you're in a battery constrained world, are you going to put batteries into big electric trucks, or are you going to put them into many more small vehicles where your total revenue is going to be, say, 3 times more? Well, you can obviously see what the decision is going to be. It's an economic one, and electric trucks are going to be suffering in that area. So let's talk about heavy duty vehicles. Heavy duty vehicles are, well, for instance, if we're looking at greenhouse gas footprints, heavy duty vehicles in British Columbia are about 10% of the vehicle population. There's about 850,000 of them in BC, but of the greenhouse gas footprint for road transportation, they take up about half of the greenhouse gas production. Even worse than that, they're almost all diesel, and they create about 70% of diesel particulate air pollution. So the electrifying the heavy duty fleet is really, I mean, it's easy to do electric cars. It's tough to do heavy duty vehicles. And like I've alluded to, the major problem there is it's going to take a much heavier battery to do the same thing that diesel fuel would do. So the problem is, if you put a battery of existing technology, and perhaps there'll be improvements in the energy density in batteries, I'm sure there will be, but whether it's going to be significant enough, we don't know. But you take a battery and put it into a large heavy duty truck, you're going to cut out probably about 30% of the payload capacity. Trucks earn money by hauling payloads. So if, say it's a cement truck, and the cement truck can only take 70% of its load, that is a big cost increase, because per ton of concrete moved, it's going to cost a lot more, because more trips, the labor cost is higher for the drivers. It's not going to work. So there's a fundamental problem with electrifying heavy duty vehicles. In a lot of fleets, if we're talking about your Amazon delivery driver or short in-town delivery, They can probably do electric battery vehicles quite easily because the vehicles are smaller. They know exactly what the route is. It might be, 150 kilometers range, and basically the capacity limit of the cargo is not usually an issue. So for all those local delivery fleets, electric will likely be easily done. But getting to the heavy duty vehicles, such things that you don't think are heavy duty, but they are tow trucks. Tow trucks are something that operate, and if you've ever been towed by a tow truck, you know how awful the diesel smell is. Tow trucks are always bouncing up against the gross vehicle weight of limitation of the vehicle, because they're towing heavy trucks and other broken down cars. Those vehicles typically operate with small gas tanks for the same reason. They want to maximize their gross vehicle weight. With batteries, it makes it even worse. So basically, for these types of products, garbage trucks, cement trucks, dump trucks, tow trucks, they're going to need something else. So this is where hydrogen will likely have a role to play. I'm going to talk a little bit about hydrogen and some of the pitfalls there. I've been studying this for about 2 years, and I was always a bit of a hydrogen naysayer. And I used to say, in fact, in my days of VCSEA, I think I did a lecture once where I debated some PhD students on why hydrogen just won't work. And my thesis back in 2008 or 9, when I did that, was it's too expensive. And compared to battery electric, it will never fly simply because of the economics, even though the technology works. So roll forward to 2 years ago, and I was introduced to hydrogen and heavy duty vehicles, and I realized I was wrong on a number of things. When it applies to heavy duty vehicles, hydrogen fuel cell systems are lighter and they actually work more like diesel. And the costs of hydrogen, if done right, are about the same cost as diesel. And when you look at commercial fleets don't operate on the same premises as light duty vehicles owned by consumers. Light duty vehicles owned by consumers are highly underutilized assets. They basically sit in your driveway 95% of the time, or are parked somewhere 95% of the time and only used 5% of the time. Commercial vehicle fleets are used 70% of the time. They have a paid driver that probably costs $50 an hour or more to run. They earn money, and they basically have to make a return on investment. A heavy duty fleet owner that collects garbage and recycling materials estimated that his costs of operating the truck was about 50% labor, 10% energy, which would be diesel at this point, and the rest would be capital costs, depreciation, and maintenance. When we move to hydrogen, it's about the same if. The if part is the cost of hydrogen. And now we get into the argument of, okay, are we going to all be able to do green hydrogen? Because blue hydrogen sucks. I've looked at I've done the calculations, and basically what the oil industry is ramping up is no solution to climate change. We need green hydrogen, and there are a number of people who are progressing with green hydrogen, either through electrolysis. Electrolysis is the tried and true way to do it. It's expensive. Unless we can get our costs of our electricity down, hydrogen is going to be very expensive, but hydrogen has another layer of complexity that makes it expensive, and that is distribution. Hydrogen as a compressed gas is very expensive to transport unless you can produce it and distribute it right from the facility that produces the hydrogen. To distribute it like gasoline or any kind of liquid fuel is highly expensive, because you can only transport, a semi-trailer truck can only transport 1,000 kilograms. Maybe even if it's liquid hydrogen, maybe 3,500 kilograms. It's still nowhere near the value of a semi-trailer truck worth of liquid fuel.
So just 1 minute, John.
Okay,
Sorry to interrupt.
I'll wrap it up with hydrogen. So hydrogen, I see two problems with hydrogen. One is this current storage technology is compressed gas for hydrogen is very expensive, and it's going to be a barrier. The hydrogen solution that may start to make an impact on our big hydrogen fleets is actually dual fuel hydrogen that is burned. Hydrogen should never be burned as a dependent source of energy. It's not efficient. But when you burn it with diesel, you can actually reduce your carbon footprint. Again, you need to source green hydrogen. There's a couple companies in town here, Hydra, and there's 3 others in Alberta that are pursuing that dual fuel system. The great thing about that is the existing fleets can change over to 40% hydrogen fairly quickly. They can make an impact on their greenhouse gases, and they don't have to have a huge capital cost to do that. So I think that's sort of where we're at with hydrogen. I think there's still a long way to go. The other thing, going back to battery, the other solution with battery heavy-duty vehicles will be catenary systems where we have some kind of overhead charging where the batteries of the trucks can be smaller. They get charging as they're making their routes along highways. That is not really being talked about because the expense is huge, but I think we get further down the road here, we're going to run out of supply chain resources for producing batteries, or they're going to get very expensive. And I think it'll make sense over time to actually charge en route, whether that's, I haven't seen really a wireless charging solution that's really going to work, but perhaps the catenary overhead charging will be the ultimate solution on heavy duty vehicles. All right, I sort of rambled on. I hope I've made something that makes sense, but happy to take some questions.
Thank you so much, John. Very great discussion on that. And I see people chiming in on the chat as well as you were speaking. I'll give you a chance to read through those, and if you might wish to respond. Thank you, everyone who have posted your questions onto the chat. Before we go into our discussion with our 3 speakers, we have one last poll. So this talks about or asks your thoughts or your status on EV ownership. Do you drive an electric vehicle? Yes through my Modo membership. Not yet, but I hope to as soon as they're back on the market. No, prefer to cycle and use transit. No, I still drive a conventional vehicle. Please share your thoughts. We'd love to hear them, and yeah, we can have a discussion with our speakers. Cool. So while we are on the topic of EV and this poll and share the results, we are split. But yeah, most folks on this webinar would prefer to use their bikes or use transit. And still driving conventional vehicles, 24% responded yes. Kudos to all of you. And some are accessing EVs through Modo memberships. And some folks are also interested in getting their hands on EVs once they're back on the market. Amazing. Yeah, so on the topic of EV ownership, Patrick, there were several folks who posted their questions regarding Modo's EV strategy and your asset plan to retire ICE vehicles, conventional vehicles, to replacing EVs. I know you've referenced this a little bit in your talk, but if you'd like to expand on that, that'd be great.
Sure. So I mentioned that our intention is to have a complete zero emission fleet by 2030. We have, as I noted, quite a variety of vehicles in the fleet. So that depends in some categories on availability. As Guy noted, there's a lot of vehicles in the pipeline coming. We're just starting to see pickup trucks, for example. Haven't really seen in our category sort of many cargo vans yet. And passenger vans, I haven't seen anything so far, but these things will emerge over the next few years. So where are we at today? We're in what I describe as a test and learn period. It'll probably take us through the next 2 to 3 years. We keep a car on average for 6 years. So getting somewhere into 2025, we should be substantially buying EVs. There's a lot of issues to resolve in the meantime, charging being, not the least of them. And just the total cost of ownership. Our fleet, I know there was examples given of kind of cost comparisons. You can save money with an EV. That's not really our reality today. If you're an individual and you can buy an EV and get the incentives and charge it in your garage, great. If you have a return to base fleet, they're out, making their deliveries or picking up garbage or whatever they're doing, and they come back home to a kind of a secure place and they can plug in and recharge overnight and kind of do the same thing again tomorrow. That works. Our use cases are very different. So there's a bunch of things to resolve. So test and learn over the next couple of years. Keep trying things. Keep adding more vehicles to the fleet. 50 by the end of this year. Add more next year. Make sure we have enough, let's say, data that we can then take decisions from that. I think there's a lot of issues around, maintenance cost, and nobody mentioned damage cost even so far. You know what? A car that costs twice as much to buy, it's kind of cost twice as much because it's the sum of its component parts. And so the cost of damage is also going to be correspondingly higher when it gets, into a crash. And so there's a bunch of things that need to be understood better in the meantime, but we're determined on this path. We will get there. Just the rest of the world is kind of needs to catch up a little bit.
So Patrick, if I just jump in, as a private owner, we charge up at home during the night and it's easy. How do you charge your shared vehicle cars?
So far we pair charging stations to vehicles one-to-one. So we will get those from various sources. So you mentioned multi-unit residential buildings. So as you noted, bylaws now have them pre-wired. We're in virtually nearly every multi-unit residential building that's going up. We're in a couple of hundred of them today, and there's a big pipeline. So those are easy, right? As those new buildings open up, we'll put a car there. It'll have a charging station on the wall. That's easy. We have, typically with municipalities, we'll have some on-street charging stations. Those are super expensive. So that needs, a bit of support from the municipality, and it'll be like related to that in, people that know Vancouver, Easy Park, which is owned a parking organization owned by the city, some inside their parking, their parkades and so on. So it's quite a mix, but it's hard. I can't imagine today how we would find, 700 more such spots to put cars. If we could buy a car, as was noted, they're like not even available, and then where to put them when we actually have them. So test and learn over this next period.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that, Patrick. And for this next question, Guy or John, I can jump in. Electric vehicles require a large amount of power. Are the power companies in Canada able to produce enough electricity to power them?
Yes, so about 3 years ago, when the BC Utilities Commission did a public hearing around whether Site C should proceed or not, I did a detailed analysis of how much, if we electrified all the transportation in British Columbia, how much electricity would be needed. And that was without assumptions of shifting to car sharing, to bus, to cycling, and far less usage. And by a combination of solar and wind and offshore wind and geothermal and energy efficiency, the numbers worked for sufficient supply of renewable electricity without Site C. Site C, alas, is going ahead, seemingly, but it's going to have the problem. It's going to push up the price of electricity much more. Many more people will go solar, so it'll incentivize the solar revolution. So I don't see a problem with supply, and particularly because I look much more to see the future of transport with the Copenhagen route, when 80% of people are able to get around by bus, by Vimo, by car sharing, by cycling and walking. And we don't want to be thinking of a future when it's one-to-one, everyone with a car gets an electric car. We need to massively reduce our need for vehicles in the first place, but I don't see a problem financially.
I agree with Guy. I mean, I think the future is people should not have as big of vehicles they have now. If you have an SUV now, you shouldn't be buying an SUV electric. It should be, you don't need that. And my point before was, I think the OEMs are building cars to maximize profit, they're so afraid to produce a car that has less range because they think it won't sell. But really, I mean, you talked about the battery swapping. I mean, that was done by Better Place back in 2009, and it was a spectacular failure financially. But it is something I think you could do that if you said, okay, I only need a 40 kilowatt hour battery for around town. That'll give me 200 kilometers range, more than I need. But if I want to go on a tour, then I can drop in an 80 kilowatt hour battery. And then I can do my cross country tour, and as opposed to flying a plane back to Toronto or something like that. Getting back to the actual question, the actual numbers are somewhere in the order of 16 to 20% more energy to electrify our full fleet here in BC. And essentially that is completely doable. Charging between what BC Hydro is going to be bringing in very shortly as an optional service is going to be a time of use optional service where you can opt in your private residence, and you'll get a cheap rate overnight, and you'll be able to charge at a lower rate overnight. That's when you should charge anyway, and that's where I think we will be in the future. The system can handle it. The energy, we do need more energy. BC has dams. Dams are storage batteries. They are the largest storage batteries on Earth. And what we need to supplement the more energy is an input of wind and solar. Wind and solar need to be firmed up. As it turns out, storage batteries can firm up the power. So we have that ability in BC. Guy mentioned that how many Site Cs we need. Well, I'm not a fan of Site C for a host of reasons. But basically, I think it was the Canadian Renewable Energy Association came out with a study where Canadian Wind Association at the time, about 5 or 6 years ago, they basically said if we actually put in wind and solar into the BC system, we could have 6 times Site C. We just need to pump it into the dams, had to have firmed up. So I think basically we have a problem with BC Hydro. They're not a very progressive utility. It's because they are a monopolistic. They do everything from soup to nuts. And they've been under a political edict for the last since inception. So they don't think. I mean, think about it. BC is the only jurisdiction that I know of in the world that isn't supporting solar or wind. So I don't know, but we do have the energy. There's no problem there. The energy issue is actually when we convert everybody to heat pumps. Because there is issues if we convert everybody to heat pumps, that is cutting into a fossil fuel feed from the natural gas companies. That is a huge amount of energy. And if everybody went to heat pumps, then seasonally, we're going to have a real shortage of energy in the depths of winter. That is yet to be worked out, how we're going to do that. If we can replace baseboard heating with heat pumps, we will free up energy. But if we're just replacing natural gas with heat pumps, it's going to increase more energy. And that's probably the bigger concern for the utility system than electric cars.
One quick final comment. The reason why BC is not supporting wind and solar at the moment is they're producing more electricity than BC needs. So for every new kilowatt hour that costs them 10 cents a kilowatt hour, they're selling it at the border for 3 cents a kilowatt hour and making a loss on it because we have too much power. So every new system is a source of loss for them at the moment. Anyway, back to you, Iona.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, John, for sharing your perspectives on that. Another question on Modo, Patrick, and this is about accessibility. So I'm kind of lumping this question together. Can you speak about your strategy to expand in fast-growing suburban areas like Surrey, Delta, Langley, and up the valley? And someone's curious, like how large a municipal population is needed prior to engaging Modo?
So we're in, as I mentioned, we're in 25 municipalities today. So they're not all, Vancouver's. So we're in quite a few smaller locations. We're in Squamish, for example. We're in Nanaimo. We're in, quite a number of communities around the Victoria region. So it in part, it's there's quite a number of influences. So we're constantly pushing the bounds. So just in very rough numbers, if we put 100 new cars onto the grid, net new cars onto the grid, we might put 60 to 70 of those in places where we already have cars, creating more density. We'll have another, let's say 20 plus or minus pushing out the boundaries of where we are. And then we will have some cars left to put in sort of net new places, right? And this is as a co-op and an organization that's, you know, putting people before profit. Not that profit's not important. We need to cover our costs, but we will put cars in places that will take longer to become profitable, right? To make, you know, we want to make car sharing available for more people in more places. But what really works is if you're in one of those smaller communities, talk to your municipal government. Because in a lot of cases, when we enter smaller places like Saanich and the various sort of Saaniches over on the island, when we enter a new community, it's really on invitation. It was same in Squamish, on invitation from the local council. And they will provide either they will sign up as members themselves, that's usually the case. So they will also use the cars, typically during the day. Which, to John's point, you know, it's a utilization sort of question, the way the economics work. They will use the cars, and then they will also provide some sort of revenue backstop during an initial period, you know, as we ramp up. So that's really, I call that jumping the queue. If you want to jump the queue and have, you know, cars in your municipality sooner rather than later, talk to your municipal government and get them on it.
And a quick addition to that, the BC Ministry of Finance is holding budget hearings until it's open for submissions until June 24th. And I'm going to post the address to write to the budget hearings in a second. Please send a letter urging that the electric vehicle incentives are allowed for Modo car shared cars. It's a ridiculous prejudice that those who are doing the community a benefit by sharing cars don't get the same benefit. So was there a second part that we should be asking for as well, Patrick, in terms of incentives? We need, and also electric bike incentives, that should be in the budget.
Yeah, I would say, Guy, thanks for raising that. I mean, this is the power that we have as citizens, and, you know, reach out to your MLA, I think was your point, the provincial government, but your MP as well, because the $5,000 from the federal government is also super important. And I'm feeling a little bit more love from the provincial government right now. I'm cautiously optimistic. I feel like I've absolutely hit a wall with the federal government, with Transport Canada, in spite of, you know, I mobilized all the major car share operators across the country, and we sent a letter together, and we had an organization called Electromobility Canada kind of lobbying on our behalf. I mean, we did everything possible before this last budget, and it still didn't make it.
Yeah, long way to go, but good that strides are being made there, Patrick. So I guess we have time for one more question, just between you Guy, and John, to chime in on, you know, what we can do to transition long distance freight from truck to train, electrify rail, and just like this idea of converting cars to electric. I think that is one discussion as well that folks would like to hear.
Yeah, very briefly, you can convert an internal combustion vehicle to electric. It takes 9 months, and it requires 9 months of voluntary work. So the finances of it don't work if you're paying someone to do it. It's just outrageously expensive, right? Most of the trains in Europe are electric already. But when I looked into the cost of electrifying the actual railway lines in Canada, it was really, really high. So it may be that the future is going to be, you know, with some sort of, you know, maybe John knows more, whether we have a battery system for the engines themselves instead of electrifying the entire network. But all of Europe does it already. John, what do you think?
Well, as far as electrifying cars, converting gas cars to electric, I would not recommend it. I did it myself. And I spent the equivalent of a Model S on my first electric car, but that's me. I did it to the standards of what a chartered accountant, risk-averse person would do. So I wouldn't recommend EV conversions are not really viable in most cases. As far as freight, I think the train companies have got that fairly well sewn up, but they have all those trains that are running across Canada, freight trains, are all actual electric trains. It's just that they have diesel generators on them to run the electric motors that produce the torque to be able to pull that much, you know, 200 cars so we have electric trains already. It's just that they have diesel generators on them. So I was in Alberta just a couple of weeks ago doing a road trip, and as soon as I crossed the Crow's Nest Pass, all I saw was turbines, wind turbines, the entire way along. and we saw CP Rail mainline, and I'm thinking, well, maybe maybe what we need to do is we also need interprovincial transmission lines to move electricity back and forth. So why don't we do like DC, high voltage DC power transmission lines along the railroad tracks, electrify the rails, feed in all of these wind turbine sources. There'd have to be storage and everything else. It's not an easy thing to do, but it seems to me that we've got the beginnings of thinking about it. If we really, if we're going to act on that, that would be the way to go. As far as localized trains, I think there's a problem with right-of-ways and everything else. There's a project that's been sort of hovering in the Fraser Valley to relight up the interurban rail line in Fraser Valley and use a hydrogen rail system to do that. That actually works quite well because hydrogen is much more portable. You can serve it at one location. You don't have to put all the infrastructure in. So hydrogen trains are a solution for that. Trains are very efficient if we can do that. I'd like to just take the conversation into one more thing about freight and electric trains. I'm a big advocate for fast commuter rail. And the idea behind fast commuter rail is to have a train service, and think about Abbotsford to downtown Vancouver. If you could put a rail line in that had, say, 4 stops, not SkyTrain from King George to downtown with how many, 27 stops, but 4 stops between Abbotsford and downtown, and say that 4 stops and the speeds we can go, you could do that in half an hour. If you had that service, then car people are going to think, well, I could take the train, relax, read the paper, do my work on the train, and I could be there in half an hour, as opposed to sitting in traffic, not being able to do anything for 45 minutes to an hour and a half. They would do that. So I'm gonna just flip it up again. There's been a lot of talk about the high-speed rail service between Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. And people are saying, this is what we need to do, high-speed rail between Seattle and Vancouver. I think it's a great thing, but I think we have a need to do fast commuter rail in our metropolitan areas. That could be Langford to downtown Victoria. It could be a number of different communities. It could be the E&N line up the Vancouver Island. But that's the service that I think we should be focusing on. These political projects for high-speed trains, just think of the economics. We're going to go 200, 300 kilometers between Vancouver and Seattle. And how many people a day are going to use that? Maybe 1,000 people, maybe. You're going to offset some short-haul aircraft. That's great. But maybe 1,000 people are going to go to Seattle any day. How many people are coming in between the corridor of, say, Abbotsford and downtown Vancouver, and say we did a north-south route between the North Shore and White Rock? I bet you'd have 250,000 people a day on that service. It's going to be 125 kilometers worth of track versus 300, and you're going to get utilization. That is how we're going to get people out of cars. Give them a mass transit service that is much more attractive than sitting in a car, whether it's electric or gas. That is the way to do it. And then if we had a service like that, think about asset utilization. How about we put in freight on that service after hours when people aren't using trains between Abbotsford and Vancouver, and we put freight into that. So that's why I think we need to be advocating for fast commuter rail. And I don't mean fast by speed. I mean fast in that you don't have a milk run of stations. So that's what I think we should be doing it's fast commuting. It's not having milk run service like SkyTrain. SkyTrain is, the extension to Langley is a laugh, because I'm certainly not going to get, I'm only a few blocks from the Main Street station. I can walk to that and get on, but I'm not going to sit for 45 minutes to get to King George and then another 20 minutes to get to Langley. It's just like, that is torture. So we need to design our rapid transit systems to do this. We need asset utilization to use both passengers and freight uses. And I think that is where we should be advocating our leaders to do.
All righty.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Guy, last words?
We're good then, Iona. Yeah.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for sharing your perspectives, your insights, Patrick, Guy, and John. Clearly, we can talk about this longer. We can have a whole seminar on this topic, and I can see that people are really engaged in the chat, like sharing their thoughts and ideas and what's needed. And a lot of folks are agreeing with the rapid rail system that you are talking about, John. So this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the website. So for all of you who are interested in sharing this widely, it will be available and uploaded as well to the YouTube channel of We Can. And thank you.
Sebastian's going to share the website with the page where we have these videos and things.
Yes, perfect.
Just go to West Coast Climate Action Network, and you click on the climate solution, climate action. There you go, and click on transportation, and all 4 of our webinars are there with the recordings.
Yeah, very helpful. So you can all share this page to your wider network. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us in this this great conversation. Let's keep it going. Let's write to our MPs or MLAs to make transportation accessible and alternative ways of transportation accessible
and
as well.
A big thank you to Iona for emceeing us and holding us all together and keeping us on time. And
thank you so much.
Wish everyone a good evening. Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the week.